Hey everyone, so I'm back at our Airbnb. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to show you guys how I fix these holes. We got some damage from the previous guests. Not sure what happened, but yeah, I'll just go through the process. It's pretty simple. Usually, try to see if it's close to a stud. Usually you can use a stud, but I don't think there's a stud around here. Let's check it out. That's pretty far. That's gonna be a big patch. Okay, nothing really nearby, so we'll just use what we got. And what I do, usually get these backer boards, stick them in there, screw them from the top and the bottom, and then place the patch right over it. So we'll try to cut this pretty close to the damage here, and then get this cut out. All right, so I got one of these project panel drywall pieces from Lowe's, so you don't have to buy a whole piece of drywall. And one of the best tips that I ever got for patching drywall is to cut your piece from this first and then match the hole to this piece instead of doing it reverse, because it's always going to be a little wonky that way. So let's do that real quick. All right, so as I cut this hole, it ended up being pretty close to the stud, so I just cut it a little bit more, and it's right on the stud, which is a perfect scenario. So now we just need one backer board here, and then we'll use this stud. And since we matched it up to this, it should fit in there pretty dang snugly if I figure out which way it goes. And it's like this. I might need to put the camera down. With a little bit of finesse, I'll fit right in there, I promise you. It'll be a very tight fit. So, just hard to do with one hand. So, let me get that to fit in there, and then we'll add the backer board. And that will basically consist of a board like this, which is just plywood. I'll put that back there. Maybe even, like that. Drill a couple holes, put in a couple of screws, and then put our drywall piece in there. Let's do that. There's a special drill bit that you can use for installing drywall, and it has a little collar around it so you don't drive the screws in too deep. So it's kind of an alternative for instead of having an actual drywall screw gun. I'll have a link to one of these in the description. The fun part, I have some of this pink stuff, and I use that just so I know exactly when it's dry. So it goes on pinkish, and then once it's dry, it just turns bright white. And if you have some of the stuff laying around, I mean, I've had this can probably for a couple of years now, and it's kind of crunchy. You want it the consistency of a peanut butter. So if you if you find it kind of dry, just add some water to it and mix it around pretty good, and it usually gets you back to where you need to be. And if it's the more fluid it is, the easier it is to apply and get it perfectly smooth, and less sanding you have to do. All right, this wasn't ideal, but there's an old patch in here right underneath this one, and it's got quite the buildup of plaster on there. So when I put that new piece of drywall on there, there was a good 1/8 inch, 1/16 of an inch difference in that gap. And you have to remember, when this new plaster dries, it actually shrinks a little bit. So you want to build it up just a tiny bit, so when you go back, you can sand it to flush instead of having it dip down after you're done sanding once it's dry. So this is a lot more sanding than I wanted to do, but that's just what needs to happen in this scenario. So I'm gonna put a fan on this, let this dry, and then I'll sand it down, possibly do another coat here, hopefully not, and then we'll do spray texture. All right, so it's the next day. This is nice and dry. It's got quite a bit on here, but I'm not very good at making this smooth, so I'd rather put more on here and then smooth it out with sanding than try to do it with just the plaster itself. I'm not very good at that. So now we're gonna do some sanding to get that smooth, and what I usually do, I take some paper and some tape, I tape this up along here, and it catches a lot of the dust from this. So let's get started on that. Alright, so there's a few high spots and those spots in here. I might take just a little bit of plaster and just try to spread it in there. I'm not gonna wait more to let it dry, but everything else is pretty smooth. So I'll take a damp rag and just get some of the dust off the wall, and then I'll just spray. What I'm gonna spray is a fairly large area all around, just to kind of feather it in a little bit. So I'll tape off like the hand railing and things like that, just to keep the overspray from that. Yeah, so see, all my dust fell into there. Now I don't have to worry about too much of cleanup. And then I can just take it out into the garbage. All right, so let me clean this up, and then I'll set up for spraying the texture on this. All right, now for this stuff, you really just have to shake the hell out of it. And I've also noticed that it works a little bit better if it's warmed up a little bit. So if you can soak it in some warm water before you start doing this, for me, it goes on a lot easier. And also have like a test area that you can spray. Maybe go in the garage and spray a board, just to make sure you're getting the texture that you want out of it. So yeah, let's start doing some texture. So it went on a little bit heavy here in the first spray, so what I'm going to do is take a putty knife and just scrape some of this off and try again. All right, well, I think that should be good. As you can tell, I feathered it in quite a bit, and it really makes the difference. If you focus that sprayer right in this general area, I mean, it'll stand out quite a bit. So the trick to this is shaking it a lot, warming it up, doing a lot of test sprays, and even then, like, don't be afraid to clean it up if you mess up. If you put in a spray that's way too heavy, just clean it up with a spatula and some rags, like I did. And then once you start spraying it, feather it in as big as you can. I mean, it makes a big difference. All right, well, I think that's it. After this, to let it dry and paint, and yeah, that's how you fix a hole in the wall. I'll get you a close up. Pretty good, I'd say. I mean, you're not gonna be able to see that was ever there. All right, until the next one.